Welcome back, guys. Here with another episode of Eastern Shore Talk, episode number 12. I'm Jay Watson,
And I'm Cathy Castle.
and we are going to do a little bit of pivoting again tonight. Full disclosure, we're planning on doing the self care and social media topic, and we actually recorded 2 episodes last night with some technical difficulties on my part, and it got so frustrating. So we took a good night's sleep and decided to do another topic. Cathy and I are all social media'd out talking about that. So we're going to do anger and forgiveness. We're going to try that as far as how that relates to self-care.
Is there some irony with anger and forgiveness after our 2 failed social media podcast posts?
I got to say, it's funny, Cathy. I remember we were talking about going to Facebook jail right before we started recording, and I was angry at that time. Last night, it was frustrating for sure, and I was disappointed because I just enjoy the whole process of putting an episode together. So I kind of felt like I was missing out on that, but I wasn't really angry. I was frustrated with technology, and it took me a little while to figure it out, but I was able to take my equipment to work this morning and kind of figure out what was going on. So
hopefully we can recreate that at another time when we're not, worn out by that process.
yeah, so I wasn't angry, and I've forgiven myself. So
there you go.
That's good. So
okay. So you picked such a relaxing topic after our third try, right?
Well, I was looking forward to doing the social media topic because it's such a big and relevant topic for today's society, and everybody's involved with social media. And I was trying to kind of replace that with something a big meaty topic, and especially one that I've had a lot of history with myself, and have kind of navigated through how to figure that out. And so anybody that may not know, I come from a background of childhood sexual abuse. I had some bad trauma when I was younger, and I kind of suppressed a lot of those memories for a really long time. But what I didn't realize that I was not suppressing was an awful lot of anger, specifically towards my parents, that I held very unhealthily internally. And it took me up well into my 40s until I even began to kind of sort that out and kind of find some peace within myself to be able to move forward in my life in a more peaceful, healthy way. But it's a very, very difficult thing.
Well, Jay, you and I have talked about this topic a lot, and I don't know, I came across I think this is an interesting article that I came across. I'm an article person. I like articles. And I'm a social worker by trade, but that doesn't mean I'm not also a human being. And, it might be easy to talk to somebody about anger and forgiveness, but you have to acknowledge that you have some of that going on yourself, right? And
yeah.
I always have been respectful of you in how you have processed your childhood trauma and come forth and shared that with others, so that not only can you continue on your healing journey, but that you can possibly or potentially help others. And I have a lot of respect for you with that. And, I think about anger and forgiveness a lot. And I don't know, I probably would say I have a little bit of work that I personally still need to do on that. I don't believe that any human does not have work to do every single day. And
Right.
even though
Of
I'm a
course.
mental health professional, it doesn't mean that I have it all figured out, because I certainly absolutely do not. Plus, I joke sometimes, but it's not a joke. I'm a Scorpio. I'm a November birthday, so I got a good side and a bad side. And sometimes we like to, I believe Scorpios like to hold on. We like to hold on to some things.
Yeah.
So ask anybody that I've been mad at. But anyway, we have to laugh at ourselves sometimes. But I found this article that's really interesting. It's too long to read. I'd sit here and read it for probably the next half an hour, but let me just read a couple excerpts from it. It says, The simplified relationship between anger and forgiveness goes something like this, meaning this is what most of us think. I would
Right.
have said this is what I think too. You ready? Anger is bad, forgiveness is good. If you forgive someone who hurt or betrayed you, you are good. If you're angry at them, you're bad. Forgive and forget, and you'll be healed. Stay angry, you'll be sick. And I was like, yeah, yep, that's probably what a lot of us, that's our narrative that we
Perceive.
take with us, right? Anger,
Yeah.
don't be angry, that's bad. Or, forgive everybody, that's good. Don't be angry, it'll make you physically sick.
Yeah.
Forgive people, you'll be healed. So I thought that's an interesting definition. This person that wrote this article goes on to say this, that anger and forgiveness are partners. Don't know that I would have said that. They work together and often at the same time. In any real healing process, though anger and forgiveness may seem to be opposing forces, they are actually completely equal partners in the journey toward healing. Each one has its place. Each one can only proceed with the support of the other. That's an interesting piece, right? And then it says,
Yep.
anger is an emotion. Forgiveness is not an emotion. So forgiveness is a decision made by your whole self after your true emotional work has been done. You can't move to forgiveness until your emotions move you through your trouble, because your emotions are the only thing in your psyche that can move energy, memories, imbalances into your awareness. Your body can hold your pain, and your mind and spirit can remember your pain. But until you know how you feel about your pain, you won't be able to unearth it and address it. And I really thought about you a lot with when I was reading this. And I'll just say another thing real quick. I think some of us think if we're going to forgive, it's got to be this really, gushy, polite, I forgive you with all my heart and soul, maybe teary and whatever. And what this is saying is, not really. You're not just saying what you did is okay,
Right.
but because real forgiveness does not make excuses for other people's improper or abusive
Yeah.
behavior. Real forgiveness says, I see that what you are doing worked out for you at the time, but it never worked out for me.
Yeah.
There's just some excerpts from that article that I thought were very interesting.
It's funny as you were saying that. I heard someone say many, many years ago, and it's kind of similar to what you were saying that person wrote, is that feeling angry and being angry are two different things. Feeling angry is an emotion that's time specific, whether you feel angry in the moment or for a day or a week. Being angry, carrying anger for whatever we determine is an unhealthy period of time is a choice. Just like we can choose to
Yeah.
put that in a better place. So there's feeling angry and being angry. It's kind of similar to what that person was saying with them being partners. There's kind of two phases of anger. And my thing was always, first of all, it's kind of interesting when you start kind of unraveling your past and kind of going through your healing journey like I have.
Yeah.
You obviously you look back to figure out some stuff, and I always I, I had more trouble navigating the aftermath of the trauma than I did the trauma itself. It was always that I felt alone and I didn't have any support. I had no foundation.
Yeah.
I was much more angry for that than I was at the person who abused me. As strange as that might sound, because I felt like my parents specifically were supposed to be there. This other family member, although they were a family member, they weren't as obligated to me as I thought. When I was younger, I felt like my parents should have been. So I always had a harder time with loneliness and abandonment and having nobody to have my back part of it. And that's kind of part of where my anger initiated. And I discovered that I held on to anger because in my mind, my specifically my mother was not carrying any accountability for not being there. So I felt like the only accountability she was going to have was my anger towards her. That was the only punishment,
Yeah.
the only accountability was one I was thinking that I was projecting to her.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, if she had had enough character and integrity to be bothered by what I felt, she would have that character and integrity would have probably led her to a different choice earlier on, and we would have probably never had as much difficulty with navigating the aftermath. So once I kind of discovered that no matter how angry I was, no matter how long I carried it, she was not going to be accountable because of my anger. I could not assign that to her. The only real genuine accountability was going to be any that she would have possibly taken upon herself without my anything that I did. And she was just never going to do that. So I was never punishing her. She didn't care whether I was mad at her. It was just as simple as that. So I was only punishing myself. I was stealing my peace. I was stealing any kind of joy and growing up, any kind of normal, internal childhood at all, and even into my adulthood for a long time. Um, and once I kind of was able to understand that I was hurting myself and myself alone with that, and it's hard. It's so hard because there's this, like you were saying a minute ago, there's this, it's either A or B. It's black or white. We think that it's that.
Right.
And I felt like if I forgave her, if I put my anger away into a healthier place, she got away with all that she did. And
Right.
it's not one or the other. Both can be true at the same time. And once I
Well,
realized that,
we definitely think that way.
yes, she can still have been wrong in how what she did, and I can still put my anger away and move forward in a healthy way. Both can and were true once I got to that point. But that was, and
Well,
it's
look.
strange to say, but I had a harder time navigating that anger than I did the actual trauma itself, as weird as
Wow.
that might sound.
No, that doesn't sound weird. Look, I'm thinking about you with the next thing that I highlighted too. Forgiveness naturally follows the restoration of your sense of self. How many times do you say you had to find your sense of self?
Yep.
Then it also says the other person may not have changed. The original situation wouldn't have changed either, but you will have changed.
Right.
Right? And your anger would have completed the cycle and moved you into a new position of strength from which then you can truly forgive.
That's what I call that stronger sense of self that I on my line of progression of self. That's like Matt talks about the teeter totter, and there's that tipping point where you're
Right.
either tipped to the unhealthy or you tip to the healthy, and that in my progression of self line, finding a stronger sense of self is the tipping point because once you do that, then your past does not matter as much. Other people's opinions don't matter as much. You're so much more secure in who you are. You're not driven by fear, desperation, and insecurity. You're centered on who you are, and you believe and love who you are. And not that we don't have moments or times where we kind of falter and maybe slide back to the other side of that tipping point at times. Um, but yes, and how do we get to that strong sense of self? Self care, self
Yeah.
love, and self care.
Right.
Self care is such a penicillin. It's like a Swiss
It's
Army knife in the toolbox. It can do a little bit of everything.
it's the Swiss Army knife. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the two things that I was really holding on to when I was reading this is how anger and forgiveness have to work together kind of as a team, if you want to say that, and that we got to remember one's an emotion, one's a conscious action, right? That you have to get through. You need the anger to be able to get to forgiveness. I just think that's interesting thing to think about, that one is not good or bad necessarily. I
Right.
mean, obviously you don't want to stay heated and angry all the time, and there's different degrees of anger.
But
And
which anger is it? Is it the feeling anger or is it the being angry? Like I said earlier,
the
one
fact that forgiveness doesn't mean, somebody can do something horrible, but it
right.
doesn't mean you're saying, "Oh, I understand.
Or it's okay. That's not the
it's
case
okay. You
at
really
all.
understand it's okay."
Nope.
But I think sometimes we think forgiveness is that. Maybe we don't understand forgiveness.
It's
Maybe
not a
we,
get out of jail free card.
right, that forgiveness is what you do to somebody you care about. Well, you may not care about, you really are somebody that you're close to in love. You know what I mean? I'm probably not articulating that very well, but I think sometimes we get forgiveness wrong.
It's
That
a
means,
misunderstood word sometimes.
right? A misunderstood
Yeah.
word. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, you just broke the windshield of my car. Man, I hope that doesn't really happen to me.
We're
You,
not really forgiving the act.
yeah, and you're a horrible person. And I forgive you. I understand what you're doing. You will never understand why somebody did something,
Right.
but put away that pain and anger so that you can move past it.
And for me, Kathy, it wasn't just forgiving her, meaning my mother. It was
Yeah.
forgiving myself, forgiving me, because I once I kind of decided, oh, I was being ridiculous by I was kind of upset with myself for kind of stealing so many years of my life being that unhealthy inside, and I had to forgive myself for not knowing any better for the longest time because I didn't know what I didn't know, and I had to forgive myself for that, not just forgive her, but forgive myself for not coming to that
Yeah.
conclusion sooner. So that's part of it too. And forgetting myself for being angry for so long unnecessarily, and it was pointless and fruitless. It wasn't doing anything. It was actually doing the opposite of what I thought I was intending to do. That wasn't it was just it wasn't. It's and again,
Yeah,
there's
but
a
it's a
feeling.
long process. What you went through, the
Yep.
kind of trauma that you went through is a long process of
And
healing.
and don't get me wrong, there like you said a minute ago, there are different degrees and levels of angry. There's severe trauma like I went through, and then there's
Mm.
maybe have an argument with your spouse over whatever, and it's not it's an argument. You don't really it's not it's uncomfortable, but that's a different kind of anger. That's a and again it's that you feel angry in the moment or you feel angry for that day. That's an emotion. That's emotionally driven. What I did was a choice from after the events happened and after the initial aftermath up into my midlife, I chose to be angry, and it just like one day I chose to head in a different direction.
Yeah,
You
and
know, it,
if you chose, but maybe because it wasn't processed yet with you, it wasn't
yes,
done being processed.
yeah,
Your
I
emotions
was not.
were still cooking.
Yeah, I was still my myself was still marinating. I was
Yeah,
still.
you're
I
still
didn't
marinating.
know what I didn't know. Yeah,
You didn't know what you didn't know, and what I mean, literally. Sometimes only we know, but we don't even know that we're the ones that are the only ones
right.
that know. I mean, somebody
That
can look at you. How many years did I look at you and have you misread? I thought,
yeah,
yeah, you're this funny guy, and you're enjoyable to be around when you were in misery.
yep,
And I didn't know you hid
and
that so.
angry. But and I wasn't outwardly angry. I wasn't angry to
I saw
people.
you angry.
I was very focused. My anger was very focused on my
Yeah,
parents, my mother more specifically. It was I kind of compartmentalized that. It was still unhealthy, and it was still
sure.
robbing me of inner peace for sure. But I never, not to say that I never ever in my life got outwardly angry. Of course I did. Everybody does. But it wasn't. I was not an outwardly angry person in general at all. I was probably the opposite. I was very shy and introverted and quiet and kind of to myself. That's a whole other topic.
I think I need a. I think there should be a whole nother personality type. I don't know if you've ever done the Myers Briggs
Mm-mm.
percent. That's an interesting test. I like Myers Briggs, although some would argue that it's outdated. But one aspect of Myers Briggs is introvert extrovert scale. But like in my family or my marriage or whatever, I'm like on one end of the extrovert, and Marty's on one end of the introvert, and we kind of are those roles. But then I see people like you, or I've seen other people that I totally thought were extroverts, and they're like, "Oh no, on the Myers Briggs, I'm an introvert," and I was like, "Then you're a faker. How can you be introverted, but then you're going out there and you're hilarious or whatever?" And they're like, "No, no, no, I'm introverted." I think that we're missing one personality type there. You're the
Which
faker, the fake
well, I was totally a faker. I was putting on what I wanted people to see, not who I really was.
barrier.
And for the longest time, Kathy, I would categorize myself as introverted and shy. But as I've figured more of who I am out, I don't know that I'm really in my soul an introvert. And it's weird to discover that. I think I was living a trauma response. I
Hmm.
was
Interesting.
staying within to keep from getting hurt by
Yeah.
anyone, friends, whoever.
So
It
you
wasn't
are
that
the
I
extrovert.
was. Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I would say I'm like neutral. I am
In there, in the
selective.
middle.
I am selectively both. There are times when I'm each. I still in large crowds where I'm kind of expected to be social. That's not my
Yeah.
cup of tea at all. One
Yeah.
on one, I'm great. I could talk to almost anybody, no
Yeah.
matter how famous or important they are, one on one, and be pretty comfortable. Um, and like crowds in general don't bother me. Like I can go to a ball game or the movies or whatever when I'm not. And being around a lot of people just in general doesn't bother me. It's those situations where I'm expected to be social with people in a big crowd. Yeah, I'm no good. But I've discovered through the group and in the podcast that I'm more neutral than I am introvert. I just leaned introverted because of my trauma response. Just I was
Yeah.
in that shell and I was just protecting myself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know, looking at this article too, it's talking about there really aren't any shortcuts to the healing process, and sometimes people want to get rid of the anger, so they forgive to get rid of the anger, and you really
it's
can't
not a
short,
button. Yeah,
right? But that, because we've labeled stuff such good and bad, um, you know, that kind of excuses behavior. If you go ahead and don't deal with it, and you're just like, I'm going to forgive. So it's just a process, I think. And there's another example here that says, and maybe this pertains to you too. An example would be people that forgive their father, for example, for doing something out of a sense of obligation. And then because of that, because they think they're obligated to do that, they distrust all authority figures.
right.
We probably see that in society a lot, actually. So, and then they have some relationships that aren't healthy.
Yeah,
It's
and
complex.
and it's okay to both forgive a person and remove yourself from that situation. You just because you forgive, you don't have to go back to that unhealthy situation. And
There's
again,
If we could
the,
help others, and I so that's the point of why we're talking about it right now, but if we could help others really understand these two words, we would maybe be getting somewhere in society. Because
and
while we've got a false definition of both of those words.
yes, just like there's that false definition of vulnerability. That's
Yes,
another. Yeah, we'll have to do a episode on that word too.
we should. With meaning vulnerability means you're weak,
Yeah, but while
which is
people think
not
that
true.
that's yeah, no.
It's
And I'll
not true.
tell you, Kathy, one of the things that kind of, at least for me, came on the heels of being able to forgive my parents was I started to learn grace. I was able to, once I kind of
Maybe you
put,
explain that word to people that really maybe that's a misunderstood word too. Grace.
it's similar to empathy in a way, but it's a little bit more specific. And for me in my story, it was once I kind of was able to put that anger up on the shelf and kind of carry it better. Um, I was able to then think about my mother and realize because I was always aware of she had a very bad upbringing as well. It was very
Yeah,
bad,
yeah.
and I was able to then look back and say again, it doesn't excuse her. What she did was still wrong, but at least I can look back and give her grace and say, yeah, she must have been going through some stuff to not be able to have been the mother that she could or should have been in any way, shape, or form. And she must have been going through some. Well, she's definitely going through some stuff, meaning substance abuse. Um, she was an alcoholic for as
And
long as
what was that hiding, right?
yes, and I once I was able to kind of be able to look back and say she messed up, she was wrong, and at the same time, I can, as a human being, without the weight of that anger, look back and say with grace and say, wow, she was really struggling to have gotten to that point where she was not being the person that she could have been and figured herself out, and that led to her mistakes as a parent. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
grace, grace kind of, and I didn't set out to give her grace. It just kind of, I think when you that putting that anger away, it's like a cloud. You're kind of lifting the cloud, and you start kind of seeing some things more clearly that you couldn't see with that cloud in the way the whole time. Um, so I was able to kind of empathize with her. Grace and empathy are very similar. You're
Yeah.
not that you're not really putting yourself in their shoes, but you have a level of understanding that she suffered too. She had some difficulties and some traumas along the way as well, and that led her to do what she did. Although the acts were still wrong, it just it gives me an understanding of how it may have come about. Just like I did some unhealthy things moving forward with that before I figured out some stuff in my life that affected other people in relationships. Hers just happened to be as a mother. Mine just happened to be as a romantic partner. So being able to say, "Oh, I made some choices that I shouldn't have made because I didn't know what I didn't know," just like she did. It doesn't mean that either her or I were right or it was okay that we did what we did. It kind of doesn't give an excuse, but it gives a reason behind how her and I got to those points in our lives. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes. Definitely tough conversations, and I mean, you and I talked about this earlier that um when we were prepping, you have a more serious childhood trauma that you're speaking about with your anger and your forgiveness, but certainly there's a lot of it in everyday life, which could be like you have maybe a similar situation that you have. I think that is much more common than
Right.
we're willing to talk about. But then there's things like divorce and chronic illness and you know death. I mean, how many times have you heard somebody not understand why, a young person maybe passed of cancer, or
Right.
maybe they even took their own life, and then they say they're angry at God, or they're, angry at something.
Angry at themselves. Yeah.
There's no answer. And I think when we don't have an answer, we're searching for that, and that anger emotion comes in, and just how do people get to that area of peace, like you
Yeah.
said? I mean, it's, or there's a spouse that maybe there's some
Yeah.
infidelity in the relationship, and they're really angry, and people are just really stuck in a lot of anger spots.
There's a
All
and
of
it,
us
and it,
do, naturally, I think. We
yeah.
have, I mean, if you're in a relationship, you're probably angry about something. Today,
Yeah. Sure.
you're in a relationship with Mother Nature right now. I'm looking outside and it's gray. I want it to be nice and not rainy.
Yeah.
Marty wanted to cut the grass, so he's mad at Mother Nature. We have anger
Yeah.
in all kinds of situations. And how do we, turn the coin and think of it differently or get past it?
And anger is like trauma in that we all kind of carry it a little bit differently.
Mm,
There's no handbook that you go step by step to kind of figure out our anger. It's dependent on the event that made us angry or the person. Obviously, if it's someone or something that's closer to you, you're going to feel more deeply than not with another situation. And two people can go. There might be someone out there that went through a very similar childhood experience that I did, but they carry theirs maybe better or worse than I did.
yeah.
There's no rhyme or reason, but there is. We all, I think, through my experience, have to come to a point where we're done being angry, where we have to realize it's not serving any positive purpose anymore. And again, that point in time is going to be different from person to person, but it's only when we get to that point and we understand that it's hindering us from peace.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, like addiction in this way, where you have to hit the bottom, get to the. You have to be so fed up with being angry that you start taking steps to navigate it, and it's that point in time is different for everybody's path, and the path is not always linear. Like with anything else, it's I it took me years and years and years, and it took me forever to kind of even figure out that it was not serving a purpose for me, and it because I didn't know what I didn't know. That's such a I use that term a lot because with age of wisdom, we kind of look back and we're like, I get it now, and and sometimes mistakes, and sometimes, well, not sometimes, a lot of times, the bad stuff that happens to us are the best teachers in our lives. We grow so much more from failures than we do from successes, and
Oh, I agree.
uh, yeah,
Like
and just
409, right? They failed 408 times.
yeah, I'm I say this all the time, and I say it about my abuse specifically, but it go, with my anger as well. I'm not the person I am today if I don't have that specific road to have
Right.
had to navigate at the time. I'm just not, and I'm actually grateful. I've been forced to be strong because I didn't have any other choice. I would not have. Let's just say hypothetically that 10 years ago I found someone and I got married. I would not have, knowing how I get so committed to a relationship, I would not have taken the time and space to find myself if I had. And it's ironic because that's all I ever wanted. I was so driven to find a relationship
Okay.
because I thought that was going to fill the void that I was missing as a child. And come to find out that it was actually keeping me, not that those people were keeping me from finding myself. I was making those choices, but
Right.
that direction I was going was keeping
Yeah.
me from finding myself. And so it's you just you never know when the answers are going to come, but you always have to be looking for them. You're not going to find them if you're not looking. They're not going to just show up on your doorstep by themselves. But sometimes you're looking one place and they'll kind of tap you on the shoulder as you're. It's been a lot of work and so much self care and so much trial and error, but it has been the most gratifying result that I could have ever imagined, and it's been these past 6 years or so have been the best by far of my life, and I wouldn't trade them for the world, including all the process that I've had to go through to get here.
What do you think forgiveness how does that how does it show how does it look? I mean, it doesn't mean or does it mean? What do you think? Does it mean you have to say, "Hey," do you have to physically say to that person, "Hey, I forgive you," just to let you know? I don't
You don't have to.
or
Sometimes
do
you're
you think
able
people
to.
think you think people think that?
I think people probably do think that.
Like I have to show up with a smile on my face and a box of brownies or a box of brownies or a tray of
Because
brownies.
I do think that sometimes there are circumstances, sometimes, not often, but sometimes where people, when they say the words to that person who's done them very
Right.
wrong, they use it as a tool. In other words, they want to throw it in their face. That they want to say, "I'll show you. I'm going to live a better life, so I'm forgiving you. Take that."
Yeah.
Instead of saying,
Use your anger like that. Be like, I got you.
"Yeah,"
Got you.
and
You
it's
didn't
they're
want
kind
me
of
to.
defeating the purpose. It's about intent. That person that wronged you may have passed, and you don't have the opportunity to
Yeah,
say the word.
yeah,
So, but
yeah.
that doesn't mean that you can't put that aside and move in a better direction. But my opinion is no. You don't have to say those words to that person. It's an internal thing anyway. That's where the intent's coming from. It's it's that inner peace for you ultimately anyway.
It's you
However,
release. It's you
yes.
releasing the bag of rocks you're dragging.
However, I do think there can be some good in confronting that person face to face and in a healthy way saying, listen, and kind of use that grace card and say, look, like for hypothetically, I could have gone to my mother and said, look, I know you had a terrible childhood. I get it. It doesn't mean what you did was right. I'm not forgiving the act, but in order for me to move forward and find peace within myself, I can no longer use the time and energy to be angry at you. So I'm forgiving you and forgiving myself, and I need to move forward and separate myself this. And you know, you, it can be a because in theory that person may come back to you and say something like, "I get it. I could not. I was so wrong back in the day," and they may have a response that you never. Every circumstance is different. About, I guess my short answer is no. You don't have to do it face to face, or at least my opinion. That's just my thoughts.
People say too, shoot, I've probably said it, I'm not gonna lie, where somebody has said, you know, that's nice. That's nice that you did that, but I'm not that good of a person. I can't do it. I'm not that good of a person.
I've had
I've heard
people tell
that.
me that. I've had other people that have gone through stuff that have asked me for advice, and they said, "I'm not there yet. I can't do it," and that's okay.
Maybe
But
that just means it doesn't mean you're not that good of a person. It means you're not there yet. You haven't simmered or
right
gotten it out first. Your
again,
emotions.
it's about intent. Don't do it out of spite. Don't do it as part of the punishment to that other person.
Yeah.
Don't say, "I'm not going to give them that relief." Don't do it because of that. If you're not ready, you're not ready. That's one thing. But to choose to you're really choosing to continue to carry the burden of the anger. Is what you're really doing by if you're doing it just out of spite, because you're not really there's no gain there.
I heard somebody say this recently too, and I had to really think on this, but somebody had in a relationship had done something to the other person, had hurt them, and somebody said, and they were resentful, and still bringing up and not letting it go, but had choose to come to terms with, put it in the past, but the other person's still bringing it up. And somebody else said, you know what, if you've chosen to forgive, for example, and move past it, it's not your job then to continually punish that person.
Right.
So I think we fall into those traps at times too, right? But because you still remember it. And you're
Yeah.
like, but you did that to me, and then maybe you're not as over it as you thought you were. I
Right.
don't know.
And that's fine. Everybody's process is different. Everybody's timeline is different. I found for me kind of one of the indicators where I kind of knew that it was heading in the right direction for me was I started to feel indifferent about the situation. In other words, I wasn't really giving it any thought, good or bad. It was no
Neutral,
longer, it
get it to
wasn't
be
there.
neutral, right?
Yeah,
Hmm.
it was a memory for sure. The memory doesn't go away, but I didn't have even if someone were to bring it up, I didn't react in a way one way or the other. And Dr. Phil actually said that one day. He said when you get to the point where you're indifferent about the things that have happened to you, you know you're heading in the right direction because it's not affecting you. You're not you're not giving it any space and time in your head.
I was boredom scrolling the other night, and I was reading an article. Why I clicked on this, I have no idea. About Kathy Lee Gifford and Howard Stern. Did I tell you about that?
Mm-mm.
And it was about anger and forgiveness. Maybe that's why I was kind of tuning in on it, because something we've been talking about. But apparently, and I may have the story not completely accurate, Howard Stern had a lot of negative things to say about her, about Kathy Lee Gifford. And I mean, that was part of his thing. Maybe it still is. I don't know, to kind of do the shock stuff.
It's not
But
nearly as much anymore, but yeah.
so I guess she was singing the national anthem at some event, some sporting event or whatever it was, and he encouraged the fans of his show to boo her because he didn't like her. He
Right.
had opinion, he drew opinions about her, but they had never. I don't even think they had ever met. So it happened, and she was, upset by that naturally, and some kind of feuds going on. And she said one day they were in the same studio or whatever, and people were aware of the feud, and they're like, keep them separated, keep them separated. And she left her dressing room, and people are like, well, wait, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm gonna go see Howard. And they're like, oh my gosh. And she went down and looked right at him, and because he was, I guess, a judge for, maybe, was he a judge for
America's
America's
Got Talent. Yep.
Yeah, he was a judge, and they were in the same whatever studio,
Mm-hmm.
lack of better term. And then she went down, she looked at him, and she said, I want to wish you a good show, or something like that, right? And he was shocked. And that's all she said. She
Right.
she went back to her thing. So then apparently he attempted to get a hold of her and left a message, and they ended up talking, and then she invited him to her house to have dinner, and he's like, I didn't understand why she did that, and because I had truly been horrible to
Well,
her.
yeah.
I don't even know if he had a reason for it. It's he was just being Howard Stern.
Yeah.
And then she said, of course, she's a big person of faith, and she said, God told me to just go forgive him, to just
Yeah.
stop worrying about it. And she did. And it seemed by the article, from what she reported, that she felt good about it, even though her family said don't do it, and her friends and her supporters. But he was shocked, and he felt better about it. She said, no, he's still an odd duck, but
Right.
they, came to some truth. So those are hard things,
Yeah. He's
right?
actually changed quite a bit. He actually had President Biden on not too long ago, believe it or
Mm-hmm.
not. And they had a really very cordial, like normal political. He's actually he was a fan of President Biden, so they had a nice conversation. He's a lot of celebrities. He has his Sirius XM show, and it's evolved. It's a lot of musicians. He's a big music fan, so he's like a lot of musicians will go in there and play a song. There's been
Right.
some. Harry Styles did Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer. He did a cover of that, which was fantastic. Miley Cyrus and Metallica sang
Mm.
Nothing Else Matters, and it was fantastic. He's had some, like, if you go on YouTube and look up Howard Stern musical guest, he's had some like amazing performances of like big time acts come in there. He's very, not to say that he's kind of like still has some edge to him. He does, but he's grown up, I think, and I think he's much more like accepting of a lot of people now. It's pretty cool to see, and he's very smart. He's like just an intelligent guy. Um, Not that and I don't listen to him all the time, but he sometimes he kind of gets over. He's a little silly. He's more silly now than he is raunchy. He's kind of that's kind of passe now, so he doesn't really go there. But yeah, I don't know why I went on that tangent about Howard Stern, but
And well, because I brought it up about their feud and Cathy Lee. But another thing I was thinking about is I have a friend who teaches at the Naval Academy, and he's an ex-Marine, so he's always cool. He's cool. I mean,
yeah,
not rattled, right? And
yeah,
I asked him recently, I'm like, what is the secret sauce? What is the secret sauce? I mean, I think that you could do anything to him, and he just, it just rolls off. And he's like, well, I don't know that there's a secret sauce, but he's like, what he has found that works, or that people do, it's back to self-care, Jay. It's, meditation, prayer, mindfulness, stoicism, whatever it is, but it's kind of bringing yourself back. And he said, never let them see you sweat.
yeah,
That's a hard one, right? But bringing yourself back to calm with whatever your self-care tool is to, calm your nervous system and not
yeah.
be just wild. Because I mean, I can feel that way. I can feel like, what? I can feel lit up when I'm triggered or mad or whatever, but just how to bring it back down.
And I think an important part of self care, Kathy, is reminding yourself who you are, is reinforcing that strong sense of self. And because, we go through stuff, life happens for all of us, and we kind of get knocked down a little bit. So We
Well,
feel,
every day, right? I
yeah,
mean, we're not promised anything. We're in a very human world, and for some reason, we we think that that's not going to come, and it's going to come. The challenges are there, the obstacles are there, and how do you become a person that is like, okay, this has happened. Now, what am I going to do to get around it? Maybe I can't change the situation, but how do I get to a point of joy and peace, forgiveness, or whatever, and not just be dwelling in a, you
yeah.
know, a dark hole of anger and resentment?
It's that whole anger and forgiveness thing. They kind of, like you said, they can kind of be considered kind of partners. They certainly go hand in hand, whether that's a good thing, whether it's a bad thing. But
Yeah.
I think we all have to kind of navigate and kind of realize, especially that anger that we hold on to for so long, we have to kind of come to terms with why we're doing that and do the
Let
self
me
care and remind ourselves who we are and kind of put that in a better place.
Jay, besides typical ways to deal with some of the things that you've dealt with, therapy or talk therapy, cognitive behavior, whatever. Did you ever try any kind of journaling or writing your thoughts out in some way to
I,
what did you do it for one, and two, was it helpful?
well, many like long, 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 long time ago, I was not long after I came out of the service, and it's funny.
Mm,
You have to go through all these things when you go into the service. Well, you also have to go through all these tests and all when you get discharged. When you leave, you got to get a physical, and you have to have a psychological evaluation when you're leaving as well, not just when you're going in. And
mm,
I had talked to a therapist while I was in, and because I struggled with being in, not just with my life, but I just had a hard time being in the service. So
yeah.
I kind of started talking to some therapists then. And right as I got out, um, I continued that for a little while, and I was talking to this therapist about my situation with my parents, and
Mhm.
they said, "Have you ever thought about writing your parents a letter? Like write each one of them a letter?" And I did that, and he said, "You don't have they don't have ever have to read it. If you
Right.
want to mail it, you can. You don't have to, but just write what you feel." And I tell you, Kathy, um, just the like the release of stuff from putting it on words on a page. They never read them. I never mailed them, but
Yeah.
because I got so much out of just writing down how I felt, and I was as because I'm very creative and descriptive, and I enjoy. I, as you know, I actually wrote a book many years ago, never published, but I wrote a fitness book. But anyway, so I like that whole process.
Yeah.
So I like the writing approach anyway. But I was discovering that I was pulling more stuff out of me as I wrote. It was literally like it was coming up from deep within me. And the more I wrote, the longer I wrote pages and pages to each parent. They never read them, never mailed them, but that was a huge help for me. And I started journaling. I also around about the same time I did some journaling. It wasn't as comprehensive for me back then as people that journal for mental health now. It was not as intentional. It was literally just like I was literally just documenting what I was doing each day, and sometimes I would say, I had a great time doing this, or I was upset about this. So sometimes it would come out like that, but it was more I was just like literally just documenting, and it kind of it centered me, and it kept me in the day. I didn't go, I was not outside of myself as much, so it helped in that way. So I'm yes, I'm a very big proponent of that. I've not done it for many years, either one, but I certainly got a lot out of it myself. Yes.
I agree. I think he could definitely be. I don't journal all the time, but I do have a journal app. I don't. Maybe we've talked about it on the podcast, but Apple has a journal app that I really do like, and I feel like it's geared more toward positivity. It asks you questions. I mean, if you or you could just free write, but it asks questions that are really kind of cool for you to answer, and it's more of a positive light. But I feel like I go in and out of that personally, but I have had times where I just was not feeling good. I felt like the universe was against me, you know. And if I sat there and wrote it all out, I mean, and if I went back and looked at it, it's just nonsense. Like the labels that I had given myself, or
Yeah.
how I really felt that the world was perceiving me at that time. It's like, back to that whole negativity thing that our brain likes to zone in on the negative, and it's really hard to dismiss those negative thoughts when they're intrusive and they come in. So journaling is a way to get that out, move it. Let's move that energy onto paper and hopefully through.
And I'll tell you what helped me also was, and I did it for probably a couple of years. And what was cool also was going back and looking at old entries, and I
Right.
could kind of see progress, and I could kind of
Mhm.
see I would get perspective, and I would say, well, today was not the greatest day, but a year and a half ago I had a worse day, and so there's always worse, there's always better. But I've heard therapists say journal, but don't go back and read anything. I've heard that approach. I don't know. I don't understand that myself, but there must be some logic behind it. But me going back and reading what I had written from 6 months earlier, whatever it was kind of
You could see some
just,
change.
yeah, I could kind of see progress, and I gained some perspective as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, anger and forgiveness are a tough nut to crack. It's very tough, but it's if you do and you start heading in a better direction, I could not. I'm telling you, it's mind change. It's life changing. It's mindset altering. It's you get that just that much closer to that inner peace that we all want.
And don't you even think if people, we're talking about forgiving other people, but you did mention earlier forgiving yourself too,
Yes,
or forgiving. I mean, I just keep thinking about people that have some loss due to maybe they're aging and they've lost some mobility or ability to drive, or and they're just really angry because of something they've lost. There's not I don't know that there's anybody to forgive in those situations except for the universe, or just life in general. But could you backfill that, and if you're angry or you're feeling lost, what could you do to pivot? Maybe you can do you can't live your life exactly the way, or those factors. If somebody has a mobility challenge, just say they're not able to walk the way they used to be, or whatever. What can they do instead? I think that we as humans really have a hard time filling in those holes,
yeah,
of what we've lost to get, and then we stay stuck in an anger spot. You know what I mean?
yeah. That's kind of again, and I hate to be redundant, but it's that self care thing because
Yeah.
if we if we maintain that strong sense of self, and look, I get it where you know we're kind of used to hopping in the car and going wherever we go, to the grocery store, or just to see a friend, or just to take a drive, whatever it is. That those things in and of themselves are self care, but at the same time, it's and look, if and when the time ever comes where I can't drive anymore, I'm not going to like it. There's no question
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
Um, but I would hope that I could I would have maintained a strong enough sense of self to say I'm greater than that. I'm greater than the ability to drive wherever. I can call a cab, or I can ask a friend, or
Yeah.
you know,
Get delivery.
yeah. It's I would think that I could probably still do a lot of the things that I was doing. I just a matter of how I got there might be different. Talk about the specifications you're talking about. Not to say
Yeah.
it would be easy and it wouldn't be an adjustment, because I'm sure it would be. Um, yeah, that self care thing's a. If we pay attention to it and we listen to what it's trying to tell us, it can help with a whole lot of things.
Well, and I hear people say sometimes too, people that are really maybe in a bad spot. They're like, don't be, don't just keep talking about all this fluffy, happy
Mush,
stuff.
yeah,
Um, but I think what we're talking about is the prevention piece. Self care
yes,
is really kind of a bit of a
yep,
prevention tool. You might need that Swiss Army knife before something happens.
yep.
you know, if,
It's keep it putting oil in your car so it doesn't
yeah,
break down. Yeah,
if we can pat ourselves, then maybe
yep,
we can prevent us from getting to some of these. Not that, and I'm talking about just general stuff. I'm not talking about
yeah, oh yeah,
things that happened to you,
yep,
because certainly we don't want people to start blaming themselves for bad
right,
things that have happened to themselves,
yeah.
because there are plenty of things you can't help. But, if you can just help some of the regular obstacles.
So what I think I'm going to do, Kathy, with this topic, and I'm going to start doing this with everything we talk about, is if you guys are listening or listening to this on Spotify, on that specific episode, I can ask a question and you guys can answer whatever. So my question this week is going to be something along the lines of, um, do you have difficulty forgiving, or how easy is it for you to forgive, or have you had a hard time letting anger go? Something along those lines. And if you're on watching or listening on Apple Podcast, you can actually go in there and write a comment and review if there's a question, or if you want to talk about maybe your experience with anger and forgiveness, please do. We enjoy all that, the reviews, the comments. So those are kind of two places. Apple, you can say whatever you want. There's no specific question. But on Spotify, I will ask a question specific to that episode's topic. You guys can answer on that. And we love the feedback. It kind of helps us figure out what direction we want to go, and um, stuff like that. Plus, we can kind of figure out if the topics we're talking about are worthy, and maybe we can revisit something. If there's something that a lot of people have questions about, we can talk about it some more.
Yeah.
So let's do this for the third time, Kathy. Let's talk about the Fall Guy. You saw the Fall Guy.
I did. I saw The Fall Guy. And that was a movie that you had suggested, you had seen in the movie theater. I did not choose to go to the movie theater because I probably didn't think I would be interested in that movie. But one of my kids said, "Hey, can we rent?" How, I don't know if you know this or not, but you can
Right,
eventually rent some theater movies before they come out
right.
on streaming. So I don't know, it was like $19.99 or $24.99 to buy it. So we rented it, and I was pleasantly
Mm-hmm.
surprised by that movie. Stunts. I think stunts. I'm probably not as like you. I live with a bunch of men, and they're just like, "Wow, wow, can you believe that?" And I'm
Right.
just like, "That's dumb." I might be
Yeah.
thinking about it. Well, you rolled the car 8 times. That's just dumb. But it was a good movie. I like the storyline with it. The
Yeah.
storyline was good. The music was good.
The
Anytime
music was sneaky good. I like how they did. Yeah, they incorporated the music very strategically. It was good.
anytime you sneak in the '80s, I'm gonna like it.
A Kiss rock song that everybody
It's
knows. Yeah.
so. I was thinking though, Jay, as we're talking about the topic of forgiveness and anger, of course, um, you still got to watch, if you haven't, that version of Cinderella from, I think it was 2015. The what do you call it when it's not a cartoon? It's a real people.
Live action version.
The
Yeah.
real people.
Yeah.
Cinderella live action.
Uh huh.
That movie, and I'm not a girly girl. I'm not a princess girl because I live with all men. But I really like the message in that movie, and that there's a couple scenes in that movie that I really relate to, and obviously the deal. They're mean to her. The stepsisters are mean, the stepmother's mean to her, and yet she just somehow stays as positive as she can. And when she finally meets the prince, and she doesn't know it's the prince at the time, he asks about her family, and you can tell she's thinking about it, and this is her chance. She could probably blow them up. I would not have been as good as Cinderella. I would have blown them up. I would have busted them out. I would have
Right.
don't. That's the Scorpio in me. But she's like, they do the best they can,
Yeah.
or they do work with the best they can. And I thought, man, she could have ratted them and she didn't. And then at the end of the movie, we know what happens in Cinderella. She gets the glass slipper and the prince, and she looks back at them, and they have been horrible to her. I feel like they were worse in the live action than in the cartoon, but I don't know. It's been a long time since I watched the cartoon. And she looked back and said, "I forgive you," and they didn't even know what to do with that. They didn't know what to do with that. But it is a movie about somebody really being tortured,
Great
and
grace and forgiveness. Yep.
yes, you should really watch that movie
Yeah, I'll have to do that.
and see
So
what you pick up on it. But I was like, gosh, and I know it's all fiction, but it's like, what a
yeah,
good message.
it's got a good moral to the story. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I watched Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, and it's actually the prequel to Fury Road, and it stars Anya Taylor Joy and Chris Hemsworth, and Chris Hemsworth plays the bad guy, and is just he's out there as a bad guy. That character is just.
So how were you with him being a bad guy?
I was okay. I was not like I didn't go into it thinking one way or the other. I I'm not the hugest Chris Hemsworth fan, but I do like him in general. And I had seen the preview, so I'm like, this this kind of works. So yeah, he played a really despicable bad
I
guy.
really
So
get mad when a good character that I like plays a bad character, and I'm like,
that
you,
happened to me when the guy Remy Malik, who played Freddie Mercury, then
mm,
ended up playing the bad guy in one of the James Bond movies, and I'm just like,
what are you
that's
doing?
Freddie Mercury because he looks so much like Freddie Mercury in real life. I'm like,
Right?
that's freaking Freddie Mercury.
What you want to be? You want to be like, be better than that. You know better.
Yeah, not to say that his acting was terrible because he did a good
No,
job. It's just
but you're like,
visually, I
yeah.
was seeing Freddie Mercury the whole
You're
time.
still holding on to the other or I take characters in the other movies. What do you call that? What do they call that? Not stereotyping. That is that what it's called?
Yeah, you're just
Like
yeah.
Fonzie's always Fonzie.
Yeah, Henry Winkler's always wearing a black leather jacket. Yeah,
Yeah, you're cool. What are you doing? You're put the leather jacket on.
yeah. But so yeah. So anyway, guys, check us out on Facebook and Facebook groups. It's under Eastern Shore Talk Group. We're also on Instagram and TikTok, and the website is easternshoretalk.org. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a teaser. Cathy and I have been talking about this. We have a very, very, very special guest coming soon to a podcast near you.
I hope
And,
so.
yes. Um, and we're both very, very excited about this one. Don't want to spoil it, but needless to say, it's something that you guys are going to want to see for sure.
Well, we're gonna
Um,
keep trying to find our special guest to come on.
yeah, it's
So
and we're going to try to stay in the self care world and or the movies and streaming world. We'll have Liza Ledford on periodically. She's a great guest. I'm sure your boys will pop in from time to time talking about whatever. Um, I don't know. Was it Dylan who wanted to talk about self care and sports or something?
yeah, he did because he feels that sports is not only obviously the physical exercise of somebody being in a sport,
Right.
but the mental health, physical health, self
Yes.
care of being a part of a
Yep.
team and even watching a sport. He went into a whole rendition of it last night to me about how he thinks that is multiple layers of self care.
Yeah. So
Sports.
I can absolutely have him on and have him
Mm-hmm.
kind of moderate and lead the podcast and ask the questions and talk about it, and we can just respond to kind of because that's his topic. So we'll let him kind of lead that one. And then if any of you guys that are watching, if you have a topic or questions or something that you'd like to hear us talk about, please reach out on any of our socials or, like I said, on Apple Podcasts or answer the questions on the Spotify app. And as usual, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Take
Yeah.
care.
Thanks.